Alex, my Bears won last night.
They did. They managed to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
Can't tell.
The
Can't tell
living
if to be
embodiment.
proud or
They
just.
stole they stole victory from the living embodiment of defeat right now, which is the lowly New York Giants.
Oh, so who do you cheer for? I guess I don't even know. Do you have a team, or are you
I've
just
been a Pats
football?
fan for years.
Oh, okay. You're.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what to make of them this year. I can't tell if they're
they're kind of
good
broken.
or if they've just been playing pretty crappy teams. Like the Bengals are pretty hit or miss, and the Bengals kind of crushed the Pats.
Yeah, it. How do I say this? Tom Brady has no one to throw to. Doesn't really have anyone really running behind him, and their defense has never been the strongest part of that team. So people are actually,
You gave away all your weapons.
yeah,
Watching
yeah,
Wes Welker catch a historic season with the Broncos has got to be not great.
yeah. No, it's because the Broncos have been on TV every goddamn week, so that's been fun to watch
What
over
is
and over
what?
again.
I will graduate from the football talk in a second,
Sure.
but it has got to be. What is the Manning household like? Like, do you like your brother Peyton Manning is having a season that is putting him in to conversations about all-time best quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Eli is raising questions about whether him and Tom Coughlin are going to get the boot. Neither of them will, because they will have to have a really, really bad season. Was it Clowney is the guy that everyone's talking about for next year, right?
Yeah. Jadavion Clowney.
Okay, I thought everyone was just fucking with me when they said that.
No, that's his name.
I don't keep tabs on the drafts this early, but then again, my team still has a chance.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, no, your team has a strong chance to go relatively deep. I'd say the Pats at some point here are probably just going to kind of go off a cliff because watching them play, even when they're good, they're not that good. It's not going to be a good year.
yeah, the Bears are they're probably a low end top 10 team. I don't have ambitions of Super Bowl, but
Playoffs.
I think we will make it one or two games into the playoffs, and that would make me pretty happy. I just want to see the good Jay Cutler came out last night.
The good Jay.
Very awesome.
Yes.
Speaking of good and bad sides of things,
Hmm.
you can finally talk about Beyond Two Souls, which you reviewed this week on the site.
God, I can, can't I? Yeah, I've been.
No, you can't leave it behind just yet, Alex.
No, I suppose I can't. Yeah, no, that was a weird one to try and write. I spent pretty much all of Monday trying to write that review, and I ended up restarting it several times and just trying to find a way to actually express what the hell I felt about that game. It wasn't even until like I had to sleep on it and then come back to it Tuesday morning, and I was like frantically trying to get it done before the embargo. Then I remembered, oh wait, no one's actually awake to edit this before the embargo goes up, so I doesn't really matter. But um, that game is something else. That is, I mean, I don't know. Ask me questions about that game because I kind of don't even know where to start with it,
Well,
honestly.
you can read plenty of reviews that
Yeah,
explain, and including yours, that explain what doesn't work about it. It seems like a lot of
yeah,
what doesn't work about it it's the same things that haven't worked in David Cage's previous work, just sort of amplified as the production values have gone up. But what do you
sure.
like about it? Because that seemed to be like the thing that you struggled with when we were talking about your review before it published was you did like the game, you had all these caveats. You wanted people to go in if they were going to spend $60, go in with the right mindset and know what they're getting. So like what about it made you like what did you like about it?
There's a few things. For one thing, as much as we give David Cage shit for his whole mentality of more technology equals more emotion or whatever. Uh, this is probably the most impressive game those guys have ever made. The facial capture stuff, the motion capture stuff, the performances by like Ellen Page, Willem Dafoe, Kadeem Hardison, and really most of the cast are really really strong. The story gets just absurdly silly in several different places. But in the parts where it's less silly, when it's a little bit more grounded in the characters and their interactions, and kind of when the game spends more time trying to build up Jodie's sort of characters and motivations versus just having her, you know, gallivant off to Navajo country to go on a spirit quest or something. you can see what he was going for. You can see what he was trying to build toward. You can see what that game, could have been in the hands of, frankly, a better writer. David Cage is not the worst writer I've ever encountered, but he is definitely one of the most prone to going off on these just nonsensical, insane tangents in place of like actual conclusions.
Seems like he doesn't have an editor. If I had
No.
to, from the outside looking in, it does feel like, you do want, people to be able to. It's cool that Sony is kind of letting them be unchained and do what Quantic Dream wants to do, but it does feel like he could benefit from a co-writer or a co-editor. But that would also betray everything that he kind of talks about, which is sort of, the auteur theory and looking at himself as having a sort of a singular vision that drives, all parts of the game.
Yeah, and I don't think that vision is. If Indigo Prophecy has any indication of like David Cage's process, his process is I have this really interesting idea for a game, and I don't know how to end it, so I'm just going to throw a bunch of batshit nonsense into the mix and see what happens. Heavy Rain was maybe a little bit less overtly absurd than some of that stuff, but it still got pretty silly. This has moments of that same silliness. It just seems like there are moments where he can't quite figure out how he wants to kind of navigate the story to a meaningful end. So he'll just kind of throw these like references and scenarios and things out there that don't seem like they actually fit with the grander scheme of the story. Hey, you're just up-outing on me, but that's fine.
Trying to get that right out of my face.
So you get these scenarios where like there are these whole scenes dedicated to like Jody going to like not actually China, fake China, to stop a rogue government from creating a tear in a hole in the universe and all this other kind of shit that just feels like, why is this here? Like with all the other stuff you're building toward, with like her kind of discovering herself and kind of like what her life is and what her connection to this entity is and all this stuff. Why are we getting into all this silly like militaristic fucking crazy shit? Like why is any of this other stuff happening? And it just. It doesn't ruin it, but it definitely like makes me shake my head and just kind of go, man, I don't know what you're trying to go for here. So, and the mechanics of those games are never what really bother me. Like I'm fine with the idea of something that's a little bit more like an interactive movie than say, than perhaps something that is just like purely strictly third-person type gameplay, but. I don't, it's just like sometimes that stuff feels really rote and uninteresting. Sometimes it feels like it's kind of cool. Some of the stuff with Aiden in that game is really neat. I mentioned that sequence in the review where you're at the teenager's birthday party and you're kind of wrecking shop on all those kids, and that is really satisfying. Like that is like the really cool moment and a really cool idea. And then the game never really finds a way to make that sort of stuff that interesting again. It's like there are these bits and pieces that are awesome and totally like, sublime experiences, exactly what you kind of, think that game should or would be. And then there are other moments where it's like, no, not so much. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting. I don't want to talk too much about like a lot of the scenes in the game because that's, a lot of the reason you're playing the game, but there were definitely references to in a number of reviews a scene where people are getting, or where Ellen Page's character is getting ready for a date, and this is a scene that has very little to do with ghosts or the supernatural, or the more extraordinary elements present in the narrative, and you're just trying to put things away and get ready for the date, and then the story, how the date kind of plays out, reflects a little bit of like what you chose to put away and how prepared you were. I am surprised that as much as David Cage talks about trying to impart empathy and tell interesting stories, that he seems to rely on the fantastic as a crutch.
Yeah.
In a way that, the best scenes, I think, in all of his games are the ones that don't have those things. Like, the idea of running around, throwing away DVDs, preparing for a date, is novel in a video game. Gone Home is, a game that specifically played upon the idea of teasing the fantastic without actually executing on it, because our expectations in games have been so warped that we expect every game to have something of that nature. And I think it would be nice if it seems like David Cage's best stuff is when he doesn't immediately go to, well, now there's ghosts. Maybe if it was just a little more grounded and just about people, you're also going to leverage the technology in a better way, because it also seems like what I was reading about the game, and I'm going to play it, eventually soon too, is that when the actors were just sort of like talking about everyday sort of stuff, that also got sort of the best moments out of the acting as well, which doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, that's not just a David Cage problem. That is really kind of a game industry wide problem, and something that I think is hitting Hollywood a lot recently too. Is that, like, if you're gonna spend a whole lot of money on a game, there has to be this sort of like world-ending level of consequence to it. There has to be these big, like you said, the sort of like absurd, ridiculous kind of fantastic moments. The story has to be all about you saving. It can't just be about you discovering yourself or kind of figuring out a simple mystery or whatever. It has to be about you saving the goddamn world. XCOM, that most recent XCOM game that came out, The Bureau, was a perfect example of that. That was a game that totally should have been the X-Files in the 60s. Instead, it was all like the whole game is about you trying to circumvent this endless apocalypse that you feel in no way equipped or capable of actually taking down. So the game has to go to these insane lengths to try and make it seem like you reasonably could be, stopping this entire alien race from destroying the planet.
And I wonder, it's so hard to know without getting more insight into like the actual writing process. And you have to also, I've heard plenty of stories of how publishers become involved in that, where like, you want to raise the stakes, you want the player to have motivations. I'm sure there must be a fear that goes along with when you're making a game for several years, is like, well, if the stakes are kind of this low, like, is this interesting enough to get someone to play for 8 to 10 hours? Like, I don't blame someone for, then raising the stakes in a way that makes it maybe feel like, as a writer, that you've made it more grandiose, but in a way you've lost, a lot of the humanity or any sort of way of empathizing with the situation.
Yeah, and I think if you have a good enough writer and you have good enough director and you have good enough people on it, you can make a small story really interesting. It doesn't have to be about these world-ending consequences. It doesn't have to be, about kind of the world constantly ending around you and you having to save everybody.
And Heavy Rain did that, and I think
Heavy Rain wasn't that. I know Heavy Rain was not as. I mean, Heavy Rain was ridiculous for its own reasons, but it was a human story. Like, it wasn't about the apocalypse or crazy shit happening like that. It was just about these characters and
that's why I thought that part worked, right? Like,
yeah.
Even though it went to some really absurd places, at the end of the day, like, everyone makes fun of, press X to Jason, but the idea of like losing your kid in a crowded area and trying to find some sort of touchstone for them so that you can relocate them, like, that's an empathetic situation that I bet any parent, could understand being paralyzed in. And those situations are, I think, where the kinds of games he's trying to make, they make more sense also from a gameplay perspective, because the moment he starts getting into the more fantastic or combat and things like that, we have games where we have experienced combat to such a high fidelity and a high expertise that we naturally look at those situations with kind of a crooked eye, because we're used to engaging with them in a much more profound way. But when he puts us in situations that we're not used to, taking care of your son, getting ready for a date, I don't know how to interact with those situations, because games don't do that. And so his sort of unique approach to interacting with the environment suddenly makes a ton more sense.
Yeah. And, Heavy Rain had its own set of problems. I appreciated that it did try to be something a little bit more, grounded in identifiable reality, and it was about a different type of, a storytelling. I just don't think David Cage is necessarily a good enough writer to pull off that kind of stuff en masse. It's like you said, he tends to lean on the fantastic as a crutch, because that seems to be, the easiest way for him to kind of tie that sort of stuff up. I mean, Heavy Rain totally lost me like halfway through. I just didn't like. I appreciated what it was trying to do. I just didn't like. I mean, the acting was terrible. Just the writing in a lot of that game is not very good. It just did not grab me in any meaningful way. So, I don't know, man. It's like, Beyond is a really interesting idea. I like the premise of it. I like the performances an awful lot. I think the technology, it's one of the best looking PS3 games out there. Um, it's just, you kind of have to get over that hump of what a David Cage game is. And, that's sort of where I had a hard time recommending it, was that I know a lot of people just don't subscribe to his theories of game design and narrative and all of that, and I can kind of understand why. I enjoyed a lot of it. I think that there are some parts in that game that are genuinely terrible, and there are some parts of that game that are genuinely pretty awesome. So, and as much as I hate to split the difference this way, it's one of those games where it's like, hey, did you like other David Cage games? You will probably like Beyond a lot. Did you not like other David Cage games? You will not like Beyond one bit. So, yeah. That was a troubling thing to try and express, because I really hate doing that kind of like, well, if you're a fan of this, then you'll like this, but if you're not, you won't kind of, reviews. But that was really, I think this is kind of the perfect example of exactly that kind of game that totally deserves that exact review.
Well, and I think it also reflects a split that critics have and the you experience, which is we often kind of get on our soapbox and like really want to see something different, and then something different does come along, and when it doesn't work, it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you look at it and you're like, this goes, this is what I wanted, but not this.
Right.
And that can be really frustrating. And I think that's where part of that split comes from, is like, if you do want to try something that's trying to go after something genuinely different, here it is, but it also doesn't totally work, and know that when you go into it. I'll be curious to see. We chat about this on AIM. What does he continue down this exact path? Like, is it exactly this going forward? I don't know how much he takes into account in terms of feedback. I don't think Beyond Two Souls is going to be nearly the success sales-wise that Heavy Rain was. I think there was a novelty to Heavy Rain at the time that it came out that there just isn't right now, especially given that software sales are already slumping as interest has died and Next Generation gets closer. So. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, obviously, Sony's already just straight up funding his next thing, and at the end of the day, it is probably worth it for Sony to fund whatever he does next, because he gets people talking. He may be a polarizing figure, but people pay attention to him and his products, and he had a pretty cool demo at the press conference. So.
And he does something that's different, even if it doesn't always work, it is something that is a little bit different, a little bit outside just kind of the mainstream thinking of games, and, there's something to be said for that. Can someone please get him an editor? That's all I ask. Just to hire him an editor and make him listen to them. That's all I ask.
What if they got Nicolas Cage in the new David Cage game? Could you handle that?
You fucking with me? What are you doing here?
I want to start this rumor. That's how rumors come true. If we start a rumor or an online petition, Nicolas Cage needs to be in the new David Cage.
I honestly want
Cage
that less.
Cage on Cage.
I want that less than I want a Nolan North style Nicolas Cage voice option in the next Saints Row.
Wait, you want Nolan North doing Nicolas Cage?
No, I want the way they did the Nolan North voice in Saints Row, but with Nicolas Cage.
I didn't do the Nolan North voice. What is it?
So the Nolan North voice is just Nolan North doing the whole thing, but every once in a while he just refers to himself as Nolan, and just like kind of occasionally breaks the fourth wall for like absolutely no reason.
So basically, just like trap Nicolas Cage in a room and just record him, and then just put his genuine confusion into the game. I can get behind that.
Yeah, totally. That is exactly what I'm looking for.
I can get behind that. You should play this Stanley Parable.
So you and I saw that demo,
right?
At PAX.
I dragged you over to that because I think it is something. I know it would. I already knew I could drag Brad into it because I know that's exactly the type of thing that he would be into, and I think you would be into it as well. And there is a free demo, as most demos are, out now on Steam that is not a demo in the strictest sense. If you're interested, I just highly recommend you check it out. But basically, it's a deconstruction and of what it is to create a demo that represents a full game, and also in some ways appears to represent an existential crisis on the designer's part when you have to try and come up with a slice of your game that represents everything about it, at the same time not revealing too much, like all the things you have to juggle in order to create what people call a quote-unquote effective demo.
Right.
Essentially, this demo walks you through that, which is funny given that the original Stanley Parable, which was a mod for Half-Life, was sort of a deconstruction of narrative in games in a similar way. It's mostly it kind of feels like an interactive essay, I guess, if I had to try and refine what it is about it. Is the dialogue from the narrator is it kind of sounds like the designer, who is Davey Rendon, going through his thought process of what makes a game and why they work and why they don't work, and the player kind of comes along for the ride. And
Sure.
the demo does a phenomenal job, a really funny job of breaking down what it's like to create a demo for a game, and it doesn't have any content from the full game that comes out next week, but it gives you a sense of the humor and the sense of playfulness that is happening here. And I think anyone that plays it would be hard pressed to not be interested in checking out more.
Now, I never played the original Stanley Parable, so I don't know a whole lot about what the actual game is. I've only seen that demo, which I think is the demo that is out right now.
It's a little bit different. That demo is exclusive to PAX.
Okay.
But it is the one that you will download has similar material that we saw at PAX, but is a little bit different. But at this point, you also might, you could just wait until next week when it
Sure.
comes out. Yeah, it's a fascinating little thing, and so I checked out that this week. Clicked through more Rayman Legends.
Mm-hmm.
Almost done with that. And then this trailer for Soma came out. I doubt you had time to watch it this morning.
No, I did.
Did you?
That was literally the first thing I did when I sat down after cleaning up all that cat puke. I was like, "Ooh, this is here. I want to watch this."
Yeah, man. Frictional Games, their new joint, sci-fi horror. Holy shit, man! That game looks rough.
Yeah. So you had a chance to sit down and talk with the dude behind that game, didn't you?
Yeah, Thomas Grip. He is the co-founder of Frictional, who have worked on the Penumbra games, of which there were 3. But they sort of really came on the map in a wider sense with Amnesia: The Dark Descent. And when I started planning out material for October, it made sense. I want to talk to this guy. Let's talk about Amnesia. I finally played it last year. Had a lot that I wanted to see what he had to say about that game's development. And the morning that we're supposed to chat, the first teaser for Soma comes out. And so I sent him a message on Skype. I was like, hey, are you able to talk about this? You're just putting out a very vague teaser. And he said, well, hey, how about you don't publish this until the 11th, and then we can talk all you want about Soma. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds awesome. So we ended up chatting for a full hour about Soma and the development of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which all of that is on the site. I was rushing to finish it last night while watching the Bears game. And it's just a really fascinating guy that I think even if you're not that into horror, he articulates why the genre is effective for the people that do really enjoy it.
Right.
Some designers are better than others at articulating their design process, and Thomas Grip is exceptional at articulating exactly how Frictional gets to the places it's at when it makes its games, and is also really good at deconstructing why the genre has gone a little off the rails in other places. He starts taking pot shots at a game like Silent Hill 2. Certainly one of the more famous horror games, basically because Amnesia is famous for never taking agency away from the player. You are always in control in moments where you can break it if you want to, but 99% of players aren't going to do anything. There are sequences where the monsters have you pinned into a closet, and you could jump out, but chances are you're going to stay in the closet and hope they go away. But Thomas's point being that most games, and in Silent Hill they do this with Pyramid Head, where you're hiding in a closet and Pyramid Head comes out and he kind of thrashes around and he's screwing around with a mannequin. And it is scary, but there's also no tension because you can't die. The letterbox has come up. It is a cut scene. So you are just...
So it's disturbing, but it's not really scary.
Yeah, you can't screw it up. Whereas in Amnesia, you are constantly put in situations where you could screw it up, or it's the fact that the black bars have not come up means that you could die. Maybe the game is going to put you in a situation where you suddenly have to run. But so that's how he points out a lot of what works for the Amnesia games is not even necessarily scaring you because they're doing a lot of the work. It's more just putting you in a situation where you are in control and can look around, and it makes a lot of sense. So unfortunately, that game is not coming till 2015, but I was also not surprised at the end of that trailer that it mentioned PS4. So it's a PC and PS4 joint, but obviously Sony's doing a really good job of really early lining up developers to create PS4 versions of their games, and this is yet another one that, were I not buying both because it's my job, hard to imagine that I would be picking up an Xbox One at launch. Increasingly.
I wouldn't say that it's difficult to imagine, but I think definitely my first choice would be the PS4 at this point. There's just more. I mean, granted, if you're not interested in indie games, maybe the PS4 doesn't look as appealing to you, but I don't know, man. Just looking at that lineup of indie stuff coming into that system, it's like it's hard to argue with. And something like Soma it might not seem like a big get just on paper, but people really fucking love Amnesia, and everything I've seen from those viral videos to that trailer they put out today, which is fucking creepy as shit, man.
Yeah.
That's looking real good. That's looking real good. I'm very excited about that. I'm also terrified of that, but I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed when Thomas told me it wasn't going to be coming out till 2015, and then also very excited that it wasn't coming out till 2015 because, those Amnesia: The Dark Descent is just utterly terrifying for all sorts of reasons, and I'm glad they get to take their sweet time. I'm glad Amnesia was good enough. I mean, they've been working on this game for 3 years already. And so by the time it comes out in 2015, they'll be nearing the 5-year mark, and it's cool that they can wait that long. I doubt that has anything to do with Sony's involvement. It sounds like maybe they've just sewed up that what they call console first debut. So it still might come to Xbox One. Wouldn't be surprised if it did. It's just it's going to show up first on PS4. And playing a game like that on a big ass TV, I bet would be something else. So yeah, if you have not watched the teaser for Soma, which is actually it's more than we usually get out of a teaser. It's like 4.5 minutes long, and appears
creepy.
Appears to pull from the first couple, like the opening moments of the game. But the game's exploring the concept of the soul and consciousness transference, and it definitely gets across some of that very early on. And one of the things that Thomas explained to me was that it's not uncommon for a game to explore AI and the idea of consciousness transference, but when he started trying to figure out how they were going to tell that story, they couldn't quite crack why it had to be a game, right? Like constantly the story would kind of boil down to, man, he could write this as a book, or this could be a movie. The interactive nature of games and the idea that you're in the first person is what makes it unique, and what makes the games of Frictional makes unique. And what ended up allowing them to crack it was him sort of playing SCP, which is this horror series that people are probably familiar with. And basically, it's the idea that you start stretching the personalities out and then actually layering on the personalities of the humans into the interface. So you don't see a whole lot of that in the trailer, but you see a little bit of where they're probably going with that, where the reason you'll be able to better understand the idea of this consciousness transference is because you're going to be inhabiting this consciousness in some sort of way, which is incredibly creepy to think about, but also really exciting to see what they might do with it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. 2015 seems like an awful long time away, but like you said, it also seems like just maybe far enough away, just for relief purposes.
Yeah. So that's been getting all that horror stuff ready for this week.
Cool.
Has got me ready. I got a bunch of stuff ready for next week. Probably the thing I'm the most excited about, an interview I've been teasing will happen next week that I'm psyched to have go on the site.
You were all nervous and shit too. Like you were all telling me that was the first time I've been nervous for an interview in a long time.
Movie people make me nervous. I can bullshit with the best of them on video games, but it's just sometimes interview subjects are, if they're reluctant, I can get whatever I need out of them in a game interview because I can come up with 15 BS questions pretty quickly. But movies are not my thing, and I don't have that much experience. So if you have a reluctant subject, I would feel like I would just crumble. But fortunately, that didn't happen. So,
I mean, even movies are more probably my thing, but at the same time, I still have that exact same reaction anytime I had to interview like a movie person. Like when I had to interview Nicholas Winding Refn or David Cronenberg back when I was doing Screened, like I was just a blubbering mess of jelly the whole time. I had no fucking idea what I was. I mean, I knew what I was going to ask, but I had no idea how to ask them well. You know,
you know, and it takes long to get into the rhythm, right? Like it's even like big interviews that I do in games. You know, if I'm sitting down with like a Jonathan Blow, like an intimidating figure. You know, I'm not intimidated to interview them, but there's a certain weight to the interview, and within a couple of minutes, you know, it's fine, and then we're just having a conversation, and it flows from there. And it's just with movies, there is a bigger length of time before you settle in, and then it's just a conversation. And that's what I found with my subject, that it took longer to get there, but once I was there, you know, I closed the tab on the questions I had come up. It's been a long time since I came up with a set of questions to ask if I blanked.
Yeah.
I don't normally do that. But I did do that with this one in the event that, oh shit, I need something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So that was my week.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how that one turns out.
Absolutely. So I think that probably covers what we've been playing this week. We can probably pull some headlines now, and if people in the chat want to start shooting some questions, we'll get to those later. Just shoot those my way in the chat. Saints Row DLC.
Yeah, Enter the Dominatrix.
October 23rd. I'm excited.
23rd in Europe, 22nd in America.
Okay. I'm excited, but also I'm already seeing a stack of games come up, and that's around. I think that's gonna drop just before shit gets crazy, which happens.
Yeah, it's
at the
like
end of the
the week before. And admittedly, having played a whole lot of GTA over the last few weeks, which don't worry, this is not dovetailing into or spinning off into a giant GTA discussion again, but having played a whole lot of open world games, including Saints Row and GTA over the last few weeks, I'm not sure if I'm ready to just jump right back into Saints Row all over again and just continue that cycle anew. Because believe me, I want to play that DLC, especially if that the Saints Save Christmas DLC turns out to actually be a thing that exists.
I think so. I'm pretty sure I saw that mentioned in the press release.
Yeah, I think that's coming, which sounds great. But I also might need a little bit of time away from that stuff before I jump back in.
I think I already know kind of how I feel about Saints Row. If for some reason this DLC is extraordinary, I will make time for it. But otherwise, I think I am more looking forward to setting that aside for post Game of the Year. When we have some time off, and I can just kind of screw with what I want to do. I think that would be the perfect time to play that. So that's sort of where I've compartmentalized when I'll play that. I think it's going to be great. I'm excited to play it. But unless people are like losing their mind, I'm also looking forward to playing it a little bit later.
Same. Let's see. I really only have like one or two noteworthy headlines here. THQ has risen from the dead, albeit very briefly, to sue UFC and Electronic Arts.
Yeah.
Over what they are calling, let's see, what was the term they used, because it was pretty great. Torturous. Yeah, like a tortious interference, which I don't even know if that's a word or not, but basically THQ, or whatever is left of THQ, whatever building somewhere has THQ's rights, whatever company has their rights at this point, is suing EA and THQ and UFC over the allegations that EA basically fucked up their UFC license before they went bankrupt. EA at one point was talking about buying out THQ outright, so there was divulgence of financial information during the course of those negotiations. And then at some point, EA said, nah, we're not going to buy you. And then apparently within a week or two of that, UFC said, hey, THQ, fuck you, we want out of our deal. So the allegation there is that EA may have, poisoned the well a little bit and found a way to tell UFC, hey, these guys, they're going bankrupt soon. You should totally come, hang out with us or whatever. And out of all of that, now to whoever it is that has THQ is now suing over this. I still don't really understand who it is that's even left to actually do that, but
Probably the shareholders, probably the people that aren't exactly making a whole lot. They sold everything piecemeal to try and make more money, but I want to say what I remember was that everyone still kind of took a loss. Certainly didn't make all their money back or what they were looking for. So this certainly seems like a situation where the shareholders or whatever's left, or how exactly that happens when a company dissolves in this fashion, are just looking for whatever they can get. I think THQ also sued Sega over like Company of Heroes on Steam to try and there was something along those lines. I remember vaguely, but EA is not above some shady stuff in the background.
Some dirty play.
They, John Riccitiello, famously, started talking to the Infinity Ward guys, who would later become the Respawn guys, when Infinity Ward was starting to think about whether they wanted to stick with Activision. So, the fact that EA would, and you know what, this probably isn't just EA. EA's stuff just happens to come to the surface. Maybe they, maybe it's just they have bad luck with their dirty laundry getting aired a little more frequently than other publishers. My guess is that this is rather common practice and not all that crazy. But EA has certainly done this before, so it would not shock me if they were doing this again.
Yeah, and the timing that they're listing does kind of make a lot of sense, because it is literally within like 2 weeks of EA allegedly pulling out of negotiations with THQ that UFC was all like, hey, no, we're going over here now. So yeah, there's definitely, it seems like there's something to this. I just don't know how far they're actually going to get with it, considering there is, very little of the entity known as THQ left at this point. And I'm sure EA could find a way to settle this pretty quick if they really wanted to. So
yeah, you know what those shareholders want? They want money.
Money. They just want money.
They don't want the UFC license.
No, they're not looking to get the UFC license back. They're just looking to get paid. So we'll see how that goes for them.
Yeah. Enslaved is coming to the PC later this month. Is also getting re-released on PS3. I guess with the DLC maybe or something like that. Did you play Enslaved? I loved that game.
I did. I played Enslaved. I think about a year ago, actually. And I like that game quite a bit.
You played it well after it came out.
Well after it came out. I had like a free, weekend there, so I just kind of blew through it. But that game, is real good. That is one of the games I perhaps consider most tragic that it did not really pick up a strong audience, because it deserved it. It deserved to be played and enjoyed by many people.
It was a little tragic that it didn't get more traction, but I also liked that it was kind of a one and done. Like I think it told the story. Oh, sneeze? Nope, not gonna happen.
Nope. Okay.
And it could have, you saw where they could have gone with more games, but I'm also glad that it didn't happen, because it is, I think, it's a really sweet story about like two characters, and when you hear about the setting, it sounds just as rote as anything else in video games, with a post-apocalypse and traveling across the country to go find something. But it really is just like this really touching buddy story, and like the characters don't, it's not a spoiler to say the characters don't fall in love. Like the story is not about that, and that's where you would expect it to go. And it's actually just more about these two characters and their relationship as it's just a wonderful game. If you have not played Enslaved, and you got nothing to play right now, for some reason you're in a slow period, man, check that game out, because it was tragically overlooked. And I think anyone
a long game by any stretch, like not a huge time investment.
Like 6 hours, maybe, like
6 or 7 probably. And it's and it uses those hours correctly. It uses them effectively. It doesn't stretch out shit it doesn't need to. And the acting, it's another one of those cases where the performances really do kind of make the game overall, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely an instance where the performance capture didn't feel like a gimmick. Like it was absolutely used in a way that felt right. I think Alex Ward wrote that too, right?
Oh, did he?
Alex Ward, and I'm thinking that, right? Ward, this Enslaved.
I don't remember.
No, not Alex Ward. Who am I thinking of? Who's that TV writer or that film writer?
I know who you're talking about. The guy who always works with Danny Boyle, Alex Garland.
Alex Garland. Yeah, not Alex.
That's who it is.
Yeah, the Criterion guy wrote in its.
That would have made a whole lot of sense. But no, I was like, wait, no. But yeah, no, Alex. Now I can't. I said his last name and I can't remember it. What the hell is wrong with me?
Alex Ward, let him know on Twitter how much you liked Enslaved.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis was like the lead performance in that game, and he was fucking great.
Yeah, and I never played, but heard great things about the Pigsy's Perfect 10 DLC. Heard good things about that. I know Vinny really liked it, but I didn't have a chance to play it, so I'm going to add that to the stack of things that I should probably check out, and I will say in public, so hopefully someone will bug me to actually play it and actually check it out, because I heard good things.
Totally. I really only have short headlines at this point. I don't know if you've got anything bigger.
There's mostly just short stuff. Gabriel Knight remake coming, but I never played that, but people seem to really like it.
Neither did I. So
I'll check out that remake.
There are reports circulating around that the PlayStation 4 will not be supporting Bluetooth headsets for voice chat. This comes courtesy of Game Informer. I don't know how big of a deal. I mean, I guess that's a big deal for anyone who already owns a Bluetooth headset and wanted to use it. I don't really do voice chat very much in games, so I guess that's less of a big deal to me. But I can see how that would probably piss a lot of people off, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that seems a bit of a bummer. I think it's kind of crappy that none of the stuff for the Xbox carries over, but at least they have the argument of they have a proprietary wireless signal, right? So I still think it's shitty, but it's more understandable or explainable shitty, whereas not having Bluetooth carry over seems like a bummer.
It seems like an unfortunate decision.
Yeah, it sounds like, your USB-based stuff, like Astros, like I've got those on my head now. That stuff will work, but it's not going to work at launch. That'll come in a separate update. Not sure why, but, well, I guess I do know why. Everything's coming in hot, and stuff like that is going to come and get patched in the weeks ahead of the launch of those two machines. Because, it's October 11th. We're just over a month out. I saw Adam Boyes tweeted a picture of a countdown clock in their offices.
Yeah, we're getting there, man. We're getting there.
We're close. So, yeah, it seems unfortunate. I always think it's hard not to be extremely cynical about stuff like this. Is it not supported because they're trying to cut down costs on each individual unit, and including a Bluetooth chip would raise it enough that they couldn't include it, or is it just those fuckers will buy another set of accessories, which they will.
Yeah,
we will.
We will, because we are idiots like that. We will totally do it.
Yeah. So that stuff, it's hard not to be super cynical about that. Especially when you look at like the prices of Xbox 360 hard drives. Sure. Which they always try to have some ridiculous justification about security when you actually could just rip open the Xbox 360 enclosures and swap in your own hard drive if you wanted to. I mean, only certain types of hard drives worked, but you could do that if you wanted to. That stuff always infuriated me. And controllers are freaking expensive. Like, look at that Steam controller. That thing is going to cost like $60 to $80. Like the Xbox One, PS4 controllers, like those are going to cost probably $60 to $80. Like, I don't know if there are MSRPs up for. I'm going to look right now. I want to see if there's PS4 controller.
It's worth noting that some people are saying
$60.
This all could be patched in at some point. And Sony hasn't necessarily confirmed these reports. It's just Game Informer had information from an email, I guess, that said that this was the case. So, for all we know, it could actually be changed around and fixed.
Well, I hope so. That would be nice. That would be nice, because I understand why the games don't work. The accessories, I have less sympathy for, and that often feels much more exploitative of consumers.
Certainly. Drive composer Cliff Martinez is apparently working on the soundtrack for Far Cry 4. Patrick, what are you more excited about? The fact that there is a Far Cry 4, or the fact that Cliff Martinez is working on Far Cry 4?
I mean, I don't think it's a big surprise there's another Far Cry. I mean, I thought Far Cry 3 was pretty good. The story fell apart, and that really killed the game for me in its second half. In a way that, it didn't seem to kill it for the other guys as much, but it definitely sort of.
I hated every character in that game, and I realized that was sort of on purpose, depending on how you want to take their writer's sort of stance on things. But that didn't stop me from hating every character in that game.
We had this morning show back when that guy was giving interviews.
Oh yeah.
Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Those interviews bothered me in exactly every wrong way. It's
Yep.
getting me angry just thinking about it. But yeah, I'm excited for another Far Cry. I liked what they did with that franchise. I also really liked Far Cry 2, but I understood the direction they went with Far Cry 3, and I'm more excited to see. I would much rather we find out that that composer was erroneous in saying he's working on Far Cry 4, and instead he's working on the full-fledged sequel to Far Cry Blood Dragon.
Right.
I'd much
Sure.
rather see him
Yes.
working on that because it does seem to be, by all accounts, that was successful enough that they're going to give that, maybe not its own full retail release, but I don't think whatever we see from the Blood Dragon team a second time around will just be an add-on to Far Cry 4.
I hope not.
I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up being, Far Cry 4 is probably a couple years off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Blood Dragon guys, who had, I think, something like 9 months to turn around that add-on,
Mm-hmm.
I bet that is sort of like the lead up to Far Cry 4. Like that gets people interested and excited in another Far Cry ahead of the release of Far Cry 4 as opposed to after.
I would definitely like to see them get more, because I think I was one of the people that was not as into Blood Dragon as everyone else. I think conceptually it's pretty cool, and there's definitely some really good moments in that game, but or that expansion, but it did not do it for me quite as much as everyone else, and I'm hoping that maybe just having more time and more resources at their disposal will help make something a little bit better, personally.
Yeah, they were stretching the joke a little too far, and a lot of the jokes didn't really land. But when you did talk to them about the time constraints in which it was created, I feel like enough of it lands conceptually.
Yeah.
Given more time, I think they could stick the landing in a way that was much more effective.
They definitely pulled off way more than they had any right to, given what they had at their disposal at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
GTA Online players are going to be compensated with $500,000 of in-game ducats. Patrick, what are you going to spend your ill-gotten fortune on in Grand Theft Auto Online?
I don't know. I guess I would have to turn on Grand Theft Auto Online to find out. That's not meant as a sick burn as much as I just don't have time.
This is true. Yeah.
This is true. I tried to play it that first week, try and play with the other guys, but it didn't work. So I'll get back to it eventually. I have a local buddy that is still getting through the single-player game, and when he's done with that, my guess is I'll jump in and check that out. But yeah, I just don't. I've got so much other things to play right now that I don't need to extend my Grand Theft Auto experience. But by all accounts of other folks I've talked to that have jumped in, it does seem pretty fun.
Sure.
And if they do, I know they're supposed to be adding heists to the game at some point. And
yes.
If they add heists to the game, that will probably be the moment that I jump in.
Yeah, I'm going to do so many goddamn heists with people. That will be fun. Last thing I've got, I don't know if you're as excited about this as I am, but there is a new game coming from the team behind Sleeping Dogs, Triad Wars, which is set within the Sleeping Dogs universe. How excited on a scale of 1 to holy shit are you about this?
I am excited to watch Vinny Caravella play another Sleeping Dogs game.
Sleeping Dogs is great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that game. I think it's really interesting. I have, along with many others, railed against the industry's obsession with secrecy in instances that make no sense.
Right.
When a film is really successful, they come out and just say,
"Hey, we're making another one."
Yeah, and games do that behind the scenes, but don't just say it for reasons I've never quite understood. It's because games are built on mechanics, and there's obviously a fear that that's going to get ripped off before the game comes out. But saying you're making another Sleeping Dogs doesn't say anything about what you're doing. It just gets people excited, and maybe they go and check out the original Sleeping Dogs. Like, wow, if they're making a sequel, and maybe I need to check out what all the hype was about with that original game. And they've done that with Deus Ex. They've done that with Sleeping Dogs. Not a surprise it's happening with their North American properties, the Eidos stuff, as opposed to the Square Enix stuff.
Sure.
But I guess they announced a new Kingdom Hearts, so they're announcing stuff that are years and years off. But I like that trend. I think it's healthy for the industry, and also I think encourages checking out the back catalog while people wait for more information about whatever's coming next.
Totally. I am 100% agree with you, and yes, I think it is incredibly dumb that companies are still so skittish about even mentioning that there's a sequel coming. Like, of course there's another Battlefield. Of course there's another fucking Call of Duty. In this case, maybe there wasn't as much of an of course there's going to be another Sleeping Dogs, but I am very glad to hear there's something more coming from the Sleeping Dogs universe. That is probably one of my, whatever, that game had some problems, but, that game is so much better than it really had any reason to be. It should have been a disaster considering the whole cancellation bringing it back thing, and I'm glad they are turning that into a franchise.
Yeah, and having just played GTA 5, mechanically on like core gameplay level, like Sleeping Dogs is a much better game.
The hand-to-hand combat in that game is fantastic.
Yeah, and I didn't find the sandbox in Sleeping Dogs to be that much fun. I don't know if that's because of games like GTA 4, I became trained to just sort of like play the missions and I've just sort of graduated beyond having that much fun in the sandbox. But clearly Vinny would go nuts with that stuff. So maybe that's more on me than on the game. But I'm curious to see. I feel like they nailed the mechanic side of it. Definitely curious to see what they do with the world part of it. Another go round.
Totally. That's what I got. You got anything else?
Probably briefly, I would say I am stoked to see, speaking of Square Enix, that they're going to port Final Fantasy VI to iOS and Android.
Yes.
If there was a game, an RPG for me to want to double dip on, Final Fantasy 6/3 is right up there for me with Chrono Trigger. I've never beaten 6. I have gotten to. I don't want to spoil what happens in that game, but it's been so long. But people know that have played 6. There is a final world in the sky that you get to, and you split into multiple teams. And I once had a save that got corrupted, where the save just vanished off the cartridge, and I never went back and finished it. And so I'd really like to finish that game. So I definitely am stoked to go back and play Final Fantasy VI because I loved the story in that. I loved the battle system. Like it's one of the few 40, 50-hour games that I would actually happily go back and play a second or third time.
Surely. That's all I have to say about Final Fantasy stuff. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
But Final Fantasy VI is real good. Real good. Let's see. MS Savo or Miss Avo, Bluetooth will be patched in later. So maybe that's going to happen.
Maybe that'll be happening.
90s vibe. Do you think Bungie will eventually bring Destiny to PC? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, seems logical that would happen eventually.
The way they have teased it in the past when asked about that question is, I suspect they are waiting to use that as a kind of holy shit moment as the game gets closer. They don't have a whole lot of experience on the PC, but they don't have experience on PS4 either. And they're making that work. But yeah, I expect that we'll see that game come out on the PC at some point. I would like it to come out on the PC. That would be neat.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna play that on Xbox. So
Yeah, so am I. But would be cool to see that expand. The friend asked, it seems like in relation to Soma, it should be playable on an Oculus Rift. It's not going to be. When I talked to Thomas Grip, he said that a lot of they do certain visual effects in terms of changing the field of view and zooming in the camera during certain moments of the game that would not work on an Oculus Rift. But if they can find time, he told me that they would like to make some Oculus-specific experiences in the lead-up to the game. That is mostly predicated on how far they can get ahead in building the core game that he can kind of split off and have a chance to mess with that. But the idea of Frictional creating Oculus-specific horror experiences sounds real shitty.
That sounds pretty fucking
sounds
great.
Real shitty.
Yeah.
Bane122 asks, Brad bought a Wii U, although I still have his Nintendo Network ID, and he'll never get it. Surely that's a sign things have turned around for that system. Yes.
Yes, Brad Shoemaker is the tipping point for the Wii U. It's all gravy from here. Nothing but cocaine and blowjobs for Nintendo from here on out because they are set now that Brad Shoemaker's on board.
But certainly, I think you could admit that the Wii U is in a better position, software-wise. If you were on the fence and you were a big Nintendo fan, right now is kind of a great time to jump in.
I mean, yeah, but let's just be realistic about this. There's some good stuff coming out in the next like month and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and then what does 2014 look like right now?
Not very good.
Yeah,
Not very
that's
good.
see. Once you get past like November, December, like that's where things start getting a little more sparse. And when you're looking at like the third party support, you're kind of going, So yeah, I'm gonna say maybe now is the best time to get in on a Wii U, but I don't know if that still makes it a good time. We'll see.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point. Super Mario 3D World, man. Worth
Yeah, no, I
buying a
know.
Wii U
Hey, that
for.
game's gonna be fucking great. I'm not saying that game's not gonna be great, but
You're right.
yeah.
Uh, Peter Wilson asks, what are your thoughts on Peter Moore saying that single-player-only games are going away? I don't have the quote in front of me, but it wouldn't shock me that with the direction EA is taking with a lot of its stuff, that it depends on sort of what he means by that. Does he mean, if you look at Titanfall, that's a game that tries to straddle that line, which is to bring a lot of the drama and storylines that go along with a single-player campaign, but integrate that in the multiplayer, knowing that that's what most people play with that series. Most
Right.
people are there for the multiplayer. They spend a lot of time and a lot of money building a flashy campaign that gets quickly played, never seen again, and for a lot of their audience, never seen at all.
Right.
So I expect that maybe what his comment means is looking at what Titanfall is doing and thinking, are there ways that we can merge the two in a meaningful way? I think it's way too early to know if Titanfall has pulled that off successfully. I think
Right.
it's going to be super interesting as, I've thoroughly enjoyed the time I've spent with Titanfall in a
Same.
sort of contained conference setting, but, the rubber's going to meet the road when I sit down with that game and I start playing it. And I want to see how that single-player stuff actually integrates. Like, is it just, here's a setup for the mission, and it's just a more complicated version of an objective-based multiplayer mode? Like, I don't
Right.
know. Like,
Does it
I
just
need
end up being like, a version of the side missions from like Saints Row, where it's like you all just go to a point on the map and they're like, okay, go, go kill a bunch of these dudes over here, and then that's how all the single player missions kind of play out. It's just go kill dudes over here. Okay, now you as a team go over there and just do that. Like, is it really a narrative, or is it just kind of like a series of missions?
Right, and does that, what happens after you've seen all of those maps? Like, does the narrative change each time? I could certainly see, if they're able to pull it off, the way you start doing DLC for that game, or they could do it in two ways. You actually have new maps that continue the story or have a new angle on the story, but you could also probably start revising the current maps and just changing the story elements. And it's a reason to go back into that map. And it's essentially just doing, refreshing the objectives or changing the objectives. But if they are able to meaningful tie the story into it, maybe that's a reason for me to jump in. But that also is predicated that game's going to have a particularly interesting story. And although, the Modern Warfare games had some cool setups, like I was never invested for the characters.
No.
I thought they had good reasons to set up the scenarios they did, and they had some pretty shocking moments that I think they justified in really interesting ways. It's just way too early for me to say, but I feel like they look at Titanfall and think, how can we do this with other games? Because if Titanfall succeeds, it will bring in single-player liking individuals like myself, but they're going to be playing the game well beyond the 6 to 8 hour campaign.
Yeah, it's trying to break that mold of players who just don't care about things like that stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just repeating what you said, but yes, I think that is the test, and we'll see how that all plays out.
Blackwatch, are you excited for Thief? Like what? You didn't see my passive aggressive comment when I put up the trailer earlier this week about
or the long series of passive aggressive comments we've made about that game since like E3.
Yeah. The bit I played of that game was not very impressive, but my caveat to that has been that when I first played Human Revolution, I wasn't very impressed either. And I ended up really liking Human Revolution, and I would much rather Thief comes out and genuinely surprises me and is a terrific game, because I like those types of games. I want Thief to be good. But what I have played is not very good, and I think, I, along with a lot of the other members of the press, are more cautious than ever about the time we spend with games after, Alien Colonial Marines. That game is one where I think almost unanimously across the press said, this looks pretty cool. And it did look pretty cool. But it wasn't very good.
No, and that's the thing, though, is that it looked very cool in the same ways again and again, which should have been our immediate clue that maybe these are not actually live gameplay demos. Maybe this is all just, kind of a bunch of hooey. But I can't remember what we were talking about before we started talking about Alien. My brain is just not working today.
Well, Thief,
Thief, yeah.
I played Thief, so there's the difference there. But, I used the term post-Dishonored world and when I put up the trailer. I'm someone that really, really, really liked Dishonored. And that doesn't mean that Thief has to be Dishonored. Thief has different sensibilities as a stealth game, but Dishonored set the bar pretty high for that type of game. Even if Thief has its own principles and characteristics that make it unique, Thief tends to be more stealth-oriented, whereas Dishonored was about empowering the player when they are broken from the stealth mode to be able to fight against guards and get back into situations rather than like the typical save load. Dishonored empowered the player in a way, and Thief doesn't do that, although Thief does have sequences where you can fight the guards and get back into the dark. The 20 minutes I spent with it were not very impressive, and the reports about that game's development have not made it sound particularly well handled, but all sorts of games have difficult development periods and come out on the other side okay. I try and be as transparent about my experience because I feel like that's all I can do with the information I have.
Did you see the Polygon thing that went up this week? Like, Brian Crescente did an interview with them about that game, and there's a footnote at the end that originally their writer Chris Plant was going to do that interview, and the studio straight up said no. He did that profile on us that talked about all the strife we've had at the studio. We won't do this with him. So they changed the interviewer, but they used all the same questions. But apparently they are now blacklisting Chris Plant because he wrote a thing about all the troubles they've been having.
That's not a good sign.
No.
That's not a good sign when you start getting into that.
When you're that level of defensive about anyone even writing about what's going on at your studio, that means shit has probably flown off the rails there, which is unfortunate. But
it starts to, you don't want the press to start building a narrative against you. I feel like when they do something like that, that puts the press on the defensive, that puts the developer on the defensive, when the way to handle that is just to go into Spin City, which was to sit down with Chris and explain thoughtfully and as honestly as you're able to, explain what happened, why that happened, why that situation arose, why this game's development was complicated, and here's how we're coming out on the other side of it. But when you tell someone that essentially they're legitimizing the report by blacklisting him, or at least lending additional weight to what he reported,
you make it look like a big deal no matter what.
Yeah, exactly, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And like I said, game development is a messy process, and a lot of games have really rough patches. And so they would have been better suited to talk to Chris, the guy who reported that, and channel that through him, explain their side through Chris, who was the reporter that originally broke a lot of this information. That would have been the perfect conduit for that. But instead, they chose to make a thing out of it, and that just sends a bad sign about their confidence about the game.
Sure.
So
and about their future in general.
Yeah, I hope Thief is good. I hope Thief is very good. I want a new Thief game to be good, but yeah, things like this start to add up, and it makes you a little uncomfortable. But I'm looking forward to playing more of the game, so fingers crossed. We always want good games.
Yeah, nobody wants bad games. I certainly don't, because that means more bullshit that I have to play at some point.
Yeah, if it's going to be a bad game, then you know where it's going. Send it to New York.
Going to my desk. I'm actually going to have to...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I threw an idea out there on Twitter yesterday, and I realized that I immediately made a mistake when I did it, pitching the idea for a new live stream called Blight Club, which was me just playing the worst games that I can possibly imagine, probably with other people so that it's not just me suffering.
You should do that. I think that might be... one of the things you and I have talked about is trying to figure out a way that we can do some of the stuff that the guys in the studio back in San Francisco do, but technology kind of gets in our way because there's not a way to send the video in real time. But a bad game, that might be something we could pull off.
That might be.
So we should think about that. Blight Club is that's a really good name.
I thought, and it was literally the instant I thought of the name, I was like, well, I should just put this out there and see what people think. And of course, they fucking want me to do it because people love it when I suffer.
Yeah, Alex, I think we gotta find a way to do that. It might be tough to find enough time as the review season gets into full swing, but we do have a bit of a slow period here before that starts. So. Yeah, we should talk about that off camera and see if there's a way we can get this to work, 'cause that's a really good idea.
I got to figure out my live stream setup. Like, it's one thing to record not live video here. I can kind of tweak that stuff and make it work. I haven't ever really gotten live streaming successfully working from my setup, so I got to figure that out. But once I do, I will probably try and make that happen.
Yeah, I can help you do that.
Please do.
I have suffered on the cross of live streaming the last couple of months, and I think I've got most of it down.
All right.
I think we can find a way to make that.
Let me pick your brain a little bit on Monday, because that's when I'm going to start trying to set this stuff up a little bit and figure out what games I'm going to do. And I'll ask you as many dumb questions as I can about trying to get things to sync up properly.
It's a huge pain in the ass.
I bet.
Pain in the ass. So what are you playing this weekend?
This weekend, I'm going to play some more Wind Waker. I've been really enjoying that remake a whole lot. Every minute I've spent with it has kind of been like a nice little bit of nostalgic glee for me. I'm super glad that game holds up. I'm going to play some more Audio Surf 2, which I've been enjoying in its early release state. That's one of the few early release games that I feel like has not suffered from being an early release on Steam thus far. And then I have The Wolf Among Us, obviously. Fable's first episode. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and what I saw of it a few months back was pretty great as well. So I'm definitely going to dig into that and play through that first episode this weekend.
Yeah, maybe I'll try and do that too. On Saturday, I have my 10-year high school reunion.
Oh!
Which I'm going to go to.
Okay, I didn't go to my 10-year because I was living in Boston at the time, and I did not really feel like going back to hang out with those people at a fucking golf club. Where they were having it at like the event room at like a local a golf course, and I was like, well, that doesn't sound. That
sounds not good.
No,
that doesn't seem like the kind of place that Alex Navarro goes.
Not so much.
But mine's just at some bar in the city, and a lot of my friends. I had sort of like a core group of friends in high school, and they're all kind of still around, and a bunch of us are going to go, and I feel like it would be entertaining. I don't know what kind of entertaining quite yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth 3 hours of my time.
Sure. Yeah. If I were in the area at the time, I might have gone. Though, to be honest, like a lot of people I went to high school with are still in the area, which I find a little bit unnerving. So it's always sort of weird to be like the one person who comes back. It's like, hey, so what are you all doing? We all live here.
I went and made something of myself.
Well, no, it's not even that, because plenty of them are successful and have gone on, they have nice families and good jobs and all that stuff. It's just sort of like, oh, you're all here, and I've been off over here doing my own thing for like 10 years. I don't really know what I'm going to talk to any of you about. Plus, I mean, I don't know, a lot of people I went to high school with, there are some weird shit. A guy I grew up with has been accused of attempted murder with a machete in the last 2 weeks. So it's like, I kind of don't even know what's happening. Yeah, no, it's not, because he's...
that's horrible, but that's...
He tried to kill a guy with a machete, which is kind of fucked up. But
the guy didn't die, right? The guy's alive? No actual...
No, by the grace of God, he is still alive. But that is a real fucked up thing to find out about your friends, And it's like, maybe I'm best served staying away from that whole scene for a while, Maybe just kind of extricating myself from all that.
Good point. Well,
your friends, on the other hand, I'm sure are perfectly normal and chill, and you can go hang out with them and it'll be fine.
It's just going to get drunk and laugh at people.
Good.
That's kind of the plan. But
that's what you should do.
Yeah, hopefully I can put Rayman Legends in the book this weekend. But I want to try and play through The Wolf Among Us. So hopefully I can get. I've heard it's like 2 hours, so that seems pretty reasonable for putting down this weekend. So hopefully we can talk about that on Monday. But
I think we will.
That's going to put Bombin in the end with leaving on the note of attempted murder. You know how to end a show, Alex Navarro.
I do.
You are the people's something. I don't know what you are. But you're the people's something.
Wolf.
You're the people's wolf.
Ow!
All right, Alex. I will talk to you on Monday. I gotta go find a machete for my high school reunion.
Good call. Have fun with that.
All right, Alex. I'll see you on Monday.
See you next week.